Billionaire ex-husband collapsed at his gala. The doctor who treated him was the son he never knew. The applause did not rise all at once. It began in pockets, polite at first, restrained, then growing louder as more hands joined in. Soon the sound filled the ballroom completely, pressing against the high ceilings and bouncing off glass and stone. Barry Whitlock stood still and allowed it. He had learned long ago that silence, when held confidently, made people listen harder. The chandeliers above him refracted light into sharp brilliance. Every table was dressed in white linen. Every guest wore wealth differently, some loud, some effortless, all intentional. The Whitlock Foundation Gala had always been less about charity and more about presence. Being seen here mattered. Barry lifted his glass, just enough to quiet the room. "My friends," he said, his voice smooth, measured, trained by years of command. "Tonight isn't about me. It's about what happens when discipline meets vision." The audience leaned in. Across the ballroom, Astrid Monroe felt the words land against her chest like something familiar and unwelcome. She had not heard that voice in over 20 years. Not live, not directed at her, yet her body reacted before her mind could interfere. She stood near the edge of the room, not hiding, but not seeking attention either. Her dress was deep midnight blue, chosen carefully, not to compete, not to retreat. She wore it like armor polished by time. This was not her world anymore. But once, it had been. Barry continued speaking, outlining the Foundation's expansion into medical access, rural outreach, emergency response. The crowd responded with admiration. Heads nodded, glasses lifted. Astrid listened, recognizing phrases he had once practiced aloud in their small apartment, ideas spoken with excitement, scribbled into notebooks, shared with hope. He had always believed words could build realities. She had believed people mattered more. As Barry paused, something shifted. It was subtle. So subtle that no one else noticed. But Astrid did. His shoulders tensed. His breath shortened. His left hand tightened around the stem of his glass just a fraction too hard. She narrowed her eyes. Years of community work had trained her to recognize signs others ignored. Fatigue, distress, a body asking to be heard. Barry took another breath to continue. He didn't finish the sentence. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered against the floor. The sound cut through the room sharply. Then Barry Whitlock collapsed. Not gracefully, not slowly. His body folded in on itself and struck the marble with a finality that froze the room. For one suspended second, no one moved. Then everything moved at once. Chairs scraped back violently. A woman gasped. Someone shouted his name. Security surged forward, hands raised, voices overlapping. Astrid did not scream. She did not rush forward. She felt something colder than fear settle into her bones. Medical staff pushed through the crowd, efficient and focused. Among them moved a young man whose presence immediately changed the energy around him. He did not raise his voice. He did not hesitate. He knelt beside Barry and placed 2 fingers at his neck. "Clear space," he said calmly. "I need room." People obeyed. His hands moved with confidence, checking breathing, pulse, responsiveness. He gave instructions without looking up, trusting they would be followed. Astrid watched him and forgot how to breathe, not because of what he was doing, but because of who he was. She recognized the shape of his jaw, the steadiness in his movements, the quiet authority in his voice. She knew that voice. She had heard it since childhood. The name badge on his coat caught the light briefly as he leaned forward. Dr. Elian Monroe, her son. The world tilted. Astrid gripped the back of a chair, her fingers tightening until the sensation grounded her. Her heart pounded violently, but her face remained composed. This was not how she imagined it. Not this way. Not here. Not like this. Elian focused entirely on the man beneath him, unaware of the storm standing just feet away. "Sir," he said gently, tapping Barian's shoulder. "Can you hear me?" Barian's eyelids fluttered. For a brief moment, his gaze found Elian's. Something passed between them. Not recognition, not memory. Something quieter. Something unfinished. Barian tried to speak, but his mouth produced no sound. "We've got you," Elian said. "Stay with me." Astrid felt tears threaten, but she did not let them fall. She had lived too long in strength to collapse now. "Family. Pause with me here. Have you ever realized that the moment you spent years avoiding arrives without asking your permission? If this opening already has you, tap like. Share it with someone who believes control lasts forever. And stay, because this story is only beginning. Before the gala, before the wealth, before Barian Whitlock learned how to command rooms filled with strangers, there was a time when all he wanted was to be seen by one woman sitting across from him in a quiet cafe. Barian was 26 when he met Astrid Monroe. At the time, his life was ruled by lists and deadlines. He measured days by output and nights by how little sleep he could survive on. His apartment was small, undecorated, and temporary in every sense of the word. Everything about his life pointed forward, never outward, never inward. The cafe near campus was where he went to think. It was cheap, quiet, and forgiving of men who stayed too long. That afternoon, rain tapped against the windows as Barian leaned over a table cluttered with papers. He had written projections, erased them, rewritten them, then torn the page in half and started again. His pen slipped from his fingers, struck the table's edge, and rolled across the floor. It stopped at a woman's shoe. She bent down, picked it up, and held it out to him. "You dropped this," she said. Her voice was calm, not overly friendly, not dismissive, just present. Barian looked up and paused. She wasn't dressed to impress. Her hair was pulled back loosely. A book rested open beside her cup. There was something unguarded about her posture, as though she had nowhere else to be. "Thanks," he said, taking the pen. She glanced at the papers. "You've rewritten that line 3 times. He blinked. "You noticed?" She smiled faintly. "You look like someone trying to outrun your own thoughts." No one had ever spoken to him that way. They talked. At first, about nothing. Classes, weather, the cafe's terrible coffee. Then, about everything. Barian spoke about ideas that had never left his mouth before. Astrid listened without interruption, asking questions that went deeper than ambition. "What happens if it works?" she asked. "I build something," he replied. "And if it doesn't?" Barian hesitated. "Then I try again." She studied him. "And who are you while you're trying?" That question stayed with him long after they left the cafe. Their relationship grew without urgency. They didn't rush labels or declarations. They learned each other instead. Astrid noticed how Barian's mind never truly rested, how silence made him restless. Berian noticed how Astrid could sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. She volunteered at shelters. He worked on proposals. She cooked meals meant to be shared. He forgot to eat unless reminded. Somewhere between late-night conversations and shared breakfasts, love found them. Not loud love, not dramatic love. The kind that builds slowly and feels safe once it arrives. Berian had never felt safe before. They married in a small ceremony attended by people who mattered, not people who impressed. Astrid wore a simple dress. Berian wore the only suit he owned that didn't look borrowed. They promised partnership, and for a while they lived it. Berian worked long hours, but he came home. Astrid supported his ideas, but she also challenged him. They argued sometimes, about time, about priorities, but they resolved things before resentment took root. At night, Astrid would rest her head against his chest and listen to his heart slow. "You don't have to run all the time," she'd tell him. "I don't know how not to," he'd answer honestly. She kissed his shoulder. "You'll learn." He believed her. Success arrived quietly at first. A meeting that went better than expected. An investor who called back. A contract that opened doors instead of closing them. Berian's confidence grew. Not arrogance, but momentum. His phone rang more often. His calendar filled faster. He stayed out later. Came home tired, but energized. Astrid adjusted. She understood ambition. She respected drive. She had married a man with dreams, not a man content with stillness. But as weeks turned into months, something changed. Conversations shortened. Meals cooled untouched. Berian's eyes lingered on screens even when Astrid spoke. "You're here," she said once, gently, "but you're not with me." He looked up, surprised. "I am," she nodded. "I know you think you are." The company expanded. Berian hired staff, signed leases, traveled often. He promised each absence was temporary, each delay justified. Astrid learned the language of postponement. Soon, after this deal, once things settle, things never settled. She watched him become a version of himself the world applauded, and she barely recognized. Still, she loved him. She tried to adapt. She made space. She learned to eat alone without complaint. She learned to sleep without waiting up. But love cannot thrive on accommodation alone. The night Astrid realized she was pregnant, she sat on the bathroom floor long after the test confirmed it. Not from fear, from understanding. This would change everything. She waited to tell Berian, not because she doubted his care, but because she understood his timing. When she finally spoke, they sat across from each other at the kitchen table. His phone lay face down, vibrating silently. "I'm pregnant," she said. Berian didn't respond immediately. He leaned back in his chair, rubbed his face, and exhaled slowly. "That's unexpected," he said. Astrid nodded. "I know." Silence filled the space between them. "I'm not ready," he said finally. "Not now." The words were calm, reasonable, and devastating. "We can figure this out," Astrid said, keeping her voice steady. "Together." Berian shook his head slightly. "This isn't the right time. Everything's moving too fast." Astrid felt something inside her shift, not break, but reposition. "I won't wait for a perfect moment that never comes," she said quietly. Berian stood up. I need time to think. He left the room. He dated occasionally, married briefly, divorced quietly. Nothing lasted. Everything was managed. The letter remained in a drawer, untouched. He told himself the past had resolved itself. He was wrong. When the Whitlock Foundation expanded its medical outreach, Berrien approved it with efficiency rather than emotion. The numbers made sense. The optics were strong, the impact measurable. He did not attend site visits. He delegated. The gala that year was meant to celebrate growth. It became something else entirely. Elian accepted the volunteer assignment without hesitation. It brought him to the city for the first time in years. He stayed in a modest hotel, reviewed protocols, and prepared himself with the same seriousness he brought to every responsibility. Astrid accompanied him, not as a guest, but as a partner in the outreach programs. She told herself she was ready. She wasn't sure she believed it. The night of the gala arrived. Astrid dressed carefully. Elian adjusted his coat. Neither spoke much on the way. The ballroom felt larger than life. Bright, polished, full of people who wore confidence easily. Elian focused on his role. That was the moment medicine entered his life, not as ambition, but as calling. Years passed. Elian studied relentlessly, but without obsession. He worked part-time, volunteered often, and chose paths that aligned with service rather than prestige. Astrid supported him quietly, never pushing, never steering. When he was accepted into medical school, she hugged him without tears. "I knew you'd find your way," she said. Elian smiled. "You showed me how." He excelled. Not because he chased recognition, but because he understood responsibility. His professors noted his composure. His peers relied on him during pressure. He spoke little, but when he did, people listened. During his final year, he applied for a volunteer medical initiative tied to a large foundation. The name on the paperwork didn't register. He filled out the form, signed his name, and moved on. Astrid noticed it immediately. She said nothing. Some truths are not meant to be forced. Meanwhile, Berrien Whitlock's life expanded beyond anything he had imagined. The company grew global. His influence reached rooms he once watched from outside. He became a fixture in magazines, interviews, and conferences. People asked him about leadership, about sacrifice, about discipline. They did not ask him about regret. He did not offer it. Astrid stepped inside. Time did not slow. It condensed. Berrien's breath caught, not dramatically, not visibly, but deeply enough that it hurt. Astrid looked exactly as he remembered, and nothing like he expected. The softness of youth had matured into steadiness. Her eyes held clarity instead of longing. She stood without hesitation, without fear, without need. "Elian," she said gently, "may I have a moment?" Elian looked between them, then nodded. "I'll be right outside." When the door closed, silence returned. This time, it spoke. "I didn't think you'd ever want to see me again," Berrien said. Astrid met his gaze evenly. "This wasn't about what I wanted." He swallowed. "You knew." "Yes. You never told me. You never asked." The truth landed without cruelty. Berrien closed his eyes briefly. "I wasn't ready." Astrid's voice remained calm. "You said that once." When he opened his eyes, something in them had shifted. "I have a son," he said. Astrid nodded. "You do," Barion's voice faltered. "And he's extraordinary. He dated occasionally, married briefly, divorced quietly. Nothing lasted. Everything was managed. The letter remained in a drawer, untouched. He told himself the past had resolved itself. He was wrong. When the Whitlock Foundation expanded its medical outreach, Barion approved it with efficiency rather than emotion. The numbers made sense. The optics were strong, the impact measurable. He did not attend site visits. He delegated. The gala that year was meant to celebrate growth. It became something else entirely. Elian accepted the volunteer assignment without hesitation. It brought him to the city for the first time in years. He stayed in a modest hotel, reviewed protocols, and prepared himself with the same seriousness he brought to every responsibility. Astrid accompanied him, not as a guest, but as a partner in the outreach programs. She told herself she was ready. She wasn't sure she believed it. The night of the gala arrived. Astrid dressed carefully. Elian adjusted his coat. Neither spoke much on the way. The ballroom felt larger than life, bright, polished, full of people who wore confidence easily. Elian focused on his role. She allowed herself a small smile. "He always has been—" "I missed everything," Barion said. "Didn't I?" "Yes," Astrid answered. "You did." No accusation, no bitterness, just fact. Tears gathered in his eyes, uninvited and unrestrained. "I didn't choose wrong," he whispered. "I just kept choosing later." Astrid looked at him for a long moment. "Later," she said softly, "doesn't protect anyone." Elian waited in the hallway, his posture composed, but his thoughts anything but. He had suspected, not logically, not clearly, but intuitively. When Astrid stepped out, he looked at her. She nodded. No drama, no ceremony, just confirmation. They sat together later, in a quiet corner of the hospital. "I didn't hide the truth to punish him," Astrid said. "I hid it to protect you." Elian absorbed that. "I don't feel angry," he said after a moment. "I feel grounded." Astrid studied him. "You don't owe him anything." "I know," Elian replied. "But I don't owe myself distance either." It also brought something else. Discomfort. His chest felt heavy, not with pain, but with awareness. His body, once obedient and resilient, had reminded him, without apology, that it was not infinite. He turned his head slightly and saw the doctor standing near the window. The young man's posture was relaxed, but attentive. His coat hung neatly from his shoulders. His expression held focus without severity. "You're awake," the doctor said. Barion studied him. "Yes," Barion replied. "Apparently, you experienced a cardiac event," the doctor continued. "You were fortunate it happened where it did." "Fortunate," Barion repeated quietly. The doctor nodded once. "You'll need monitoring. And rest." Barion exhaled slowly. "I'm not good at that." "I've noticed," the doctor said, not unkindly. Something in the exchange lingered. Barion had spoken to thousands of people over the years, negotiated with power brokers, dominated conversations without effort. This was different. "What's your name?" Barion asked again, as if hearing it once had not been enough. "Elian Monroe." The name struck something loose inside him. Monroe, Berrien said. That's familiar. The doctor's expression didn't change. It should be... Before Berrien could respond, the door opened. Astrid stepped inside. Time did not slow. It condensed. Berrien's breath caught, not dramatically, not visibly, but deeply enough that it hurt. Astrid looked exactly as he remembered, and nothing like he expected. The softness of youth had matured into steadiness. Her eyes held clarity instead of longing. She stood without hesitation, without fear, without need. "Elian," she said gently, "may I have a moment?" Elian looked between them, then nodded. "I'll be right outside." When the door closed, silence returned. This time, it spoke. "I didn't think you'd ever want to see me again," Berrien said. Astrid met his gaze evenly. "This wasn't about what I wanted." He swallowed. "You knew?" "Yes. You never told me. You never asked." The truth landed without cruelty. Berrien closed his eyes briefly. "I wasn't ready." Astrid's voice remained calm. "You said that once." When he opened his eyes, something in them had shifted. "I have a son," he said. Astrid nodded. "You do," Berrien's voice faltered. "And he's extraordinary." She allowed herself a small smile. "He always has been." "I missed everything," Berrien said. "Didn't I?" "Yes," Astrid answered. "You did. No accusation. No bitterness. Just fact." Tears gathered in his eyes, uninvited and unrestrained. "I didn't choose wrong," he whispered. "I just kept choosing later." Astrid looked at him for a long moment. "Later," she said softly, "doesn't protect anyone." Elian waited in the hallway, his posture composed but his thoughts anything but. He had suspected, not logically, not clearly, but intuitively. When Astrid stepped out, he looked at her. She nodded. No drama, no ceremony, just confirmation. They sat together later, in a quiet corner of the hospital. "I didn't hide the truth to punish him," Astrid said. "I hid it to protect you." Elian absorbed that. "I don't feel angry," he said after a moment. "I feel grounded." Astrid studied him. "You don't owe him anything." "I know," Elian replied. "But I don't owe myself distance either." That was when Astrid knew she had raised him well. Berrien asked to see Elian the following day, not as a father, as a man seeking understanding. Elian entered the room without tension. They spoke cautiously at first, about health, about work, about responsibility. Then Berrien said, "I don't expect forgiveness." Elian nodded. "Good." Berrien winced, not at the honesty, but at the accuracy. "I want to know who you are," Berrien said. Elian met his gaze steadily. "I am who I needed to be." Something in Berrien's chest gave way. They spoke for hours, not about missed birthdays or absent memories, but about values, about purpose, about restraint. Berrien listened. For the first time in his life, he did not try to lead the conversation. Recovery took months. Not physically, emotionally. Berrien stepped back from public life, not dramatically, quietly. He delegated without announcement. He withdrew without explanation. People speculated. He didn't respond. He began funding initiatives without his name attached. He attended meetings without speaking first. He learned how to wait. Astrid watched from a distance. Ilion maintained boundaries. Healing does not require closeness. It requires honesty. Over time, something new formed. Not the family that might have been, but the one that could still exist. Years later, Barian sat in the back of a conference hall, unnoticed. On stage stood Dr. Elian Monroe, addressing a room full of medical professionals. He spoke about access, about dignity, about presence. Barian listened with a full heart and empty hands. For the first time, that felt right. Success cannot replace presence. Love delayed becomes loss. Children are not obstacles. They are inheritances. Healing begins with truth, not control. Legacy is built in who we show up for. Family, thank you for staying until the end. If this story stayed with you, like it. If it reminded you of someone, share it. And if you believe stories can still teach us how to live, subscribe to Love Tales with Mr. Bennett. Tell me in the comments, what would you choose if later wasn't guaranteed?